Welcome back. We are now joined by legendary radio host Larry Elder. We're going to talk a little bit about the state of the Second Amendment, race politics, specifically among the Democratic Party, and his new book that he has written that addresses the issue of fatherlessness. Larry Elder, welcome to InfoWars Nightly News.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Now, Larry, I have to admit, full disclosure, I am an El Dorado.
As 7 billion other people on this planet ought to be.
Yeah, and for those who don't know, an El Dorado is kind of like saying a ditto head for Rush Limbaugh fans, you know, someone who's been listening to Larry. And one reason why I always found you to be so insightful and fascinating is because you're a minority, such as myself, who never really understood this continual talk about racism amongst our community. I always thought that racism was very over-exaggerated. You know, but from what I know, many people in the Hispanic community and in the black community don't seem to get over this issue. I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but I just think it's over-exaggerated. Your thoughts on that?
Well, of course it's over-exaggerated. I mean, this country has come a long, long way since slavery, since Jim Crow, since the modern civil rights movement. For crying out loud, we've got a black president of the United States. We've had back-to-back black secretaries of state. Arguably, the most famous person on the planet is Tiger Woods, if not Barack Obama. The entertainment industry is dominated by people like Tyler Perry and Oprah Winfrey. For crying out loud, most blacks are well above middle class. If blacks were a separate country, we would be the 15th or 16th wealthiest country in the world. I'm not saying that things are perfect. Things will never be perfect. 10% of the American people believe Elvis is still alive, for crying out loud. 8% believe if you send him a letter, he will get it. You're always going to have idiots. But can somebody who gets an education, who got drive and energy, make it irrespective of his race, color, creed, or sexual orientation in 2013 in America? Hell yeah. That's why most of the 7 billion people on this planet want to come here.
Yeah, I mean, this political correctness on the left. I mean, what do you think about the thoughts now that there are illegal immigrants coming into Congress saying, please don't call me illegal immigrant, it dehumanizes me?
Well, the Democratic Party is all about making sure that they continue their power base. If the 12 million or so people that they want to make citizens would vote, 3/4 of them Republican, would we be having this conversation? Of course we wouldn't. This is all about maximizing their power. And until and unless the borders are secured, more than that, until and unless we figure out a way of making sure that 50% of the people who enter the country legally but overstay their visas are tracked down, there's no reason to have this discussion. And what the Democrats want to do, of course, is to have the discussion holistically, meaning they're not going to secure the borders. We're going to have the same problem 20 or 30 years down the road, and then we'll welcome another group of Democrats to the country. That's what this is all about.
Now, tell us a little bit about, you know, the history of the Democratic Party's, their record on civil rights as opposed to the Republican Party's history on civil rights. Now, I'm not saying we like neoconservatism here. That's bad. Just the history on civil rights. It seems to me that the black community, they're almost like political masochists. They keep running to this party that historically has been so bad to them.
Well, understand that most people in this country, especially most black people, get their education in government schools, K through 12. They're taught by government teachers who give this revisionist / brainwash history of the respective parties. The Democratic Party is the party of racism. The first successful Republican candidate to win the presidency was Abraham Lincoln. The Republican Party was founded over the ashes of the Whig Party precisely to stop the spread of slavery and ultimately to push for its abolition. It was the Democratic Party that voted unanimously, often against the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, the amendments to automatically free blacks, to give them the right to vote, to make them newly citizens. Democrats voted against these things often unanimously. Democrats founded the Ku Klux Klan, for crying out loud. The Klan used to be called the terror wing of the Democratic Party. And as a percentage of the parties, more Republicans voted for the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 than did Democrats. What you're going to hear is a lot of people telling kids that the Republican Party really was the party of racism because all these racist Democrats in the South left the Democratic Party and joined the Republican Party. As I've mentioned, the Republican Party, more as a percentage of the party, voted for the Civil Rights Act than Democrats. If you're trying to leave a party to join a racist party, why would you join the party whose members voted for the act that you hated, that caused you to leave the other party, and who voted for that in a greater percentage than the people that you left? It doesn't make any sense. And people like Howard Baker, one of the first people to leave the Democratic Party and join joined the Republican Party, he was an integrationist. He believed in getting rid of desegregation, getting rid of segregation. So the fact is that the history has been distorted, and for some reason, most people, especially black people, believe the Democratic Party wears the white hat, Republican Party wears the black hat in the area of civil rights A and B. They believe that because of Jesse Jackson and Maxine Waters and the left media and academia and Hollywood, they believe that racism remains this huge problem in America, and but for the Democratic Party to stand up there with a sword and a shield, Lord knows where us poor black people would be. That's the mantra, that's the narrative that the Democratic Party has pushed, and unfortunately many black people have bought.
Now, there are many people that are going to say, oh, come on, Larry, that was decades ago. But as of right now, the Democratic Party, they're more our friends. Explain to people listening, what contemporary accomplishments have the Republican parties had? Has the Republican Party had?
Well, I'll tell you this. We were talking the other day, I was on the Piers Morgan show, we were talking about gun violence. And I said to Piers, look, if you're really serious about gun violence in America, the face of gun violence in America is not some suburban kid in a place like Newtown. In fact, the kid is more likely to be struck by lightning than to be killed in a school shooting. The face of gun violence in America is that 15-year-old girl who performed at Obama's administration who was killed. The face of gun violence in America is a 6-year-old Latina girl who was on a porch in Chicago one March last year when she was one of 5 people in 1 hour killed in Chicago. 500 people were killed that year in Chicago, and they're on track for 600 this year. That's 2 Sandy Hooks per month, and most of these murders are by blacks, and the blacks are usually victims, about 70% in a city that's only about a third black. The murder victims are black, and the murderers are black people, and so you have to ask yourself what's going on here. Unless you're prepared to say that black people are just genetically inclined to commit more crime than whites, you have to ask yourself what's going on. And the answer is lack of fathers in the house. In 1965, when Lyndon Johnson launched this so-called war on poverty, 25% of black kids were born outside of wedlock. That number now is 75%. 35% of white kids are born outside of wedlock. The number in the Hispanic community is almost 50%. And there's a direct relationship between not having a father in the home and you name the social ill, whether it's dropouts, whether it's becoming a member of welfare, whether it's unemployment, whether it's just gun homicides. And don't listen to people like the Heritage Foundation and people like Charles Murray. These are neocons. You can dismiss them. What about people like that well-known neocon Tupac Shakur, who in that documentary Resurrection talked about being raised without a dad? And he said, I know for a fact if I had had a father in my life, I would have had some discipline. I would have been more confident. And he went on to do an expose about how a mother can't raise a father that sounded like Jerry Falwell. So kids in the inner city are telling you what's going on. They may not know why, but they know the what, and the what is absence of fathers. And what we've done is we rewarded people into behaving slovenly by giving women financial incentives, whether it's food stamps, whether it's public housing, whether it's daycare vouchers, whether it's women, infant, and children money, and we're allowing the men to abandon their moral and financial responsibility. Bill Cosby calls such men unwed fathers.
Right. And, what can the Republican Party do to increase their support among the black community? I mean, it seems like I think it's 5% right now.
Tell the truth. Talk about what I just now talked about. Most people don't realize, if you look at the census reports from 1890 to 1940, and this covers the period of the Great Depression when 50% of black adults were unemployed, blacks were slightly more likely to marry than whites, which meant their kids were more likely slightly to be born in a nuclear intact family than a white family. What's happened? What's happened is we've incentivized bad behavior with the best of intentions. Democrats have done this, and many Republicans have sat silently and applauded or even participated in this. And what we've done is we've destabilized families all across the country, and we've seen the social ills as a result. And rather than look at themselves in the mirror and say, good Lord, for 50 years I've advocated the wrong thing, what do? They talk about racism, they talk about poverty, they talk about semi-automatic weapons, they talk about global warming, you name it, anything but the fact that they, for 50 years, have supported policies that have hurt this country.
But Larry, the Republicans, and look, I'm not a neocon, but the Republicans have told on the issue of civil rights, at least, the truth, and it just falls on deaf ears. I mean, don't they have to do more than just tell the truth? Do they have to roll up their sleeves and go into the inner city, possibly?
Well, did you hear Mitt Romney say it during the 3 debates he had, when he had people's attention, without the filter of ABC, NBC, CBS, and the left-wing media and Hollywood and academia? These are the opportunities where Republicans had a chance to say what I just now said. Romney didn't come close to saying what I just now said about what's happened to the nuclear intact family as a result of the welfare state. He didn't come close to talking about the damage done whenever you hike minimum wage, which is what Obama wants to do, at $9. He didn't come close to giving people a lecture about the history of the Democratic Party. Most people don't realize that the Klan was founded by Democrats. Romney had a chance to say it and blew it.
Now, speaking about fatherlessness and, the ripping apart of the family, you wrote a book recently called Dear Father, Dear Son, 2 Lives, 8 Hours, that talks a little bit about this issue of fatherlessness, people who are bitter towards their dads. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, the reason I wrote the book is because I wanted to write something that would talk about the importance of fathers. And I figured the best way of doing it, so I wouldn't bore people with numbers and graphs, is talk about my own dad. I couldn't stand the SOB growing up. And it took me a long time to realize that my father's gruffness that I interpreted for lack of love was just his way. I didn't find out until I was 25 years old. The book is called Dear Father, Dear Son, 2 Lives, 8 Hours. And the reason it's called 2 Lives, 8 Hours is because when I was 25 years old, after not speaking to him for 10 years, I sat down and I figured we'd have a 10-minute conversation. The conversation lasted 8 hours. And during that period of time, he morphed from this mean SOB to this kind, caring guy whose gruffness I completely misunderstood for lack of love. So the book really is a 247-page apology to a man who was always there, always in my life. He was never abusive. He was just gruff and tough. He was a Marine, a Montford Point Marine, a black Marine. He was the first black Marine, one of the first black Marines. They're the equivalent of the Tuskegee Airmen. The guy didn't know his biological father. The name Elder was the name of a boyfriend who was in his mother's life the longest. He was an alcoholic who was physically abusive. My dad came home from work one day at the age of 13, had a fight with the mother's then boyfriend, a different boyfriend from Elder. The mother sides with the boyfriend, throws my father out of the house, never to return. We're talking about a black kid, Athens, Georgia, a year or two before the beginning of the Great Depression in the Jim Crow South. And my dad still never hated the world, never hated the country, always believed hard work wins, and told my brothers and me that the world had changed dramatically from the time he grew up, and there are no excuses now.
Okay. And the issue of fatherlessness, how can this be, resolved? I mean, I recently heard Barack Obama in a State of the Union speech talking about universal pre-K. He never talks about fatherlessness. He basically says, we need more government involvement. We need government to buy your children braces, government, for education. Now let's have universal pre-K, when in fact the problem is fatherlessness. How can we make the situation better?
Well, the good news is we know it works because we've seen it work. In 1996, when Bill Clinton, over the objection of people on the left part of his party, signed the Welfare Reform Act, welfare declined by 50%, far steeper than even the most optimistic projections. Why? A whole bunch of able-bodied and able-minded people, more than we even thought, were sitting on the couch collecting their check, and once we told them that there are going to be time limits, and from now on, when you have additional children, you didn't get additional money, they got off the couch and went to work. We need to continue that. Welfare ought to be done at the state and local level by nonprofits, by churches, by individuals who know you and can give you advice that is more likely to change your behavior. That kind of welfare is far more efficient, by the way, than government welfare, which wastes a lot of money. I volunteered one time when I was working for a big law firm for a whole summer for United Way, and I was amazed at how much more efficient it is in government. You donate $1 to an organization like that, about 95 cents of the dollar gets down to the intended beneficiary. Give $1 to the government, and about 70 cents is burned up in transfer costs. So apart from anything else, it's more efficient to have welfare done at that level and far more likely to change behavior. So in the short run, we need to far more money, the charitable money for organizations that do things in the inner city. For every person that's killed, there's a big brother or big sister who might have turned somebody's life around, and we need to donate money for that. And long term, we need to stop giving people money at the federal level, no questions asked, this free welfare, because we've seen what it does to destabilize families.
Now, Larry, we've got 90 seconds left. Tell us a little bit about, speaking of contemporary issues, your opinion on the attack on the Second Amendment that we see going on right now.
Well, the purpose of the Second Amendment, of course, is to guard tyranny against government. And for people that laugh about that, I wrote an article where I posted some of the things that were said about George W. Bush, including things by George Soros, who likened the Bush administration to the Nazi regime. And Al Gore referred to the FCC as going after people who say things that the government doesn't like, and liken them to digital brown shirts. So I'm just collected a whole bunch of statements made by the left suggesting that tyranny is just around the corner. So either the people who made those kinds of statements suggesting that George W. Bush was a tyrant were lying, or they sincerely believe the possibility exists. Either way, that's what the Second Amendment is for, and the people on the left just don't appreciate why we have the Second Amendment. If the Second Amendment is not there, the others can't be enforced.
Well, Larry, thank you so much for your time. Again, the name of your book, Dear Father, Dear Son, 2 Lives, 8 Hours. It's a great read. Continue your great work.
My pleasure.
Well, that's all for this edition of InfoWars Nightly News. And remember, if you want to continue supporting our operation, become a member of PrisonPlanet.tv. For less than $6 a month, you can get access to this nightly news telecast in high def every night. You can get a lot of content, access to Alex's documentaries in high def, and you can share your username and password with up to 9 other people. So it's a great way to spread the message, or you can just get a couple buddies to just chip in a couple bucks each, and the membership will be $2 a month. So again, PrisonPlanet.tv. That's all for this edition of InfoWars Nightly News. We'll see you again tomorrow evening.